April 2020, and you're watching The Lookout, a production of the Division of World Languages and Cultural Studies here at Minot State University. I'm your host, Samuel Stinson, and on the program today we have two guests, Dianna Anderson, who's an assistant professor of piano, and Alex Deufel, who is a professor of biology. This is a different kind of production. We are recording via Blackboard Collaborate, and this is, of course, being put out on the channel like our usual podcasts. But there's going to be a little bit of a different give and take, and this is a new medium, a new environment. So it's interesting, but it also is fraught with peril and all sorts of possibilities for technical glitches. So please do bear with us. That being said, our first guest on the program today is going to be Dianna Anderson, as mentioned, an assistant professor of piano. Dianna, thank you for being on the program today.
Thanks for having me.
So Dianna, I wanted to ask a question first, starting off. Could you tell us a little bit about where did you study for your work? Where did you get your degrees? Where did you study piano?
I studied at two different institutions. One was the University of Idaho for my undergrad, and then I went to the University of Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music, otherwise known as CCM, for my master's and my Doctor of Musical Arts.
And I was looking at your faculty profile page, and I saw the word luminous show up there. And I think I've heard of Luminous before. Could you tell us a little bit more about it?
Sure. Luminous is a faculty piano trio at Minot State, and it was formed in 2004 with Dr. John Rumney and Dr. Eric Anderson. A piano trio is violin, cello, and piano, and we've been playing chamber music together ever since.
And I've read that you all have performed in various venues around the state, outside of the state?
Yeah, we've usually have done some touring and outreach to different schools, usually in orchestra classrooms at different high schools. And then occasionally we've been contracted to play concerts at various different locations. Our last one was at the University of North Dakota Art Museum.
I also noticed that you had mentioned that collaboration in music was something that was very vital to what you do. What is the process of collaboration like in music?
The process of collaboration is a lot about give and take. Everyone comes to it with their own instrument and their own interpretation, and blending everyone's thoughts and various sounds that they make with their instruments is the big centerpiece of the collaborative process.
So has there been an experience you might consider to be one of the more meaningful experiences to come out of one of these collaborative sessions or one of these performances?
I wouldn't necessarily say that any one particular instant is more meaningful than another. I absolutely love playing with anyone, and anytime I get a chance to do it, it is the most meaningful way for me of making music. I love playing with the faculty at Minot State. They're all wonderful musicians and wonderful people to work with, and so I've had many concerts with my colleagues at Minot State that have just been wonderful.
So what is upcoming for you? What's on your radar in terms of the future, in terms of performances, or in terms of, I know we have, of course, with the coronavirus, a lot of plans. I can say, I know a lot of my conferences have been upset, but what all is coming up on the agenda for you?
So yes, a lot of things are up in the air. Our next big thing is Dakota Chamber Music, which is our chamber music festival that happens on campus. It's supposed to happen the second week of June, and we have not canceled it yet, and we're very hopeful that we will be able to hold that. There will be a week of teaching, coaching high school and adult students in chamber music, and then faculty performances and presentations. So hopefully that will happen. There have been lots of other things that have been canceled, unfortunately. So we'll pick up where we left off, I'm sure, in the fall, as soon as we possibly can.
So Dianna, thank you again for preparing a musical piece for us that we're going to use to close out the program today. You'd mentioned it was the Brahms Intermezzo, Opus 118, number 2?
Yes.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, I've heard that your house is somehow connected to this particular piece.
Yeah, it is correct. My brother-in-law, Eric's brother Chell, is an architect in Seattle, and when we decided to build a home, we asked him to design our home based on a piece of music, and he was game for that. He's a very, very creative person, and we chose this piece of music as the basis for the architecture. So it's not only a very beautiful and meaningful piece from an emotional standpoint, but it also has an amazing structure underneath. So it satisfies both the emotional and the intellectual.
Well, very fascinating. And I have to say, this is the first time I've encountered this connection between music and structure. Although when you mentioned that, it makes so much sense, right? Music has structure, buildings have structure, foundations, and so I'm very much interested to see that connection that you've brought out. And this will be interesting also as we listen to the piece here at the end. Thank you again, as I mentioned, for preparing that. So I wanted to make a moment, provide a moment to have Alex, our second guest, who's going to be here momentarily. Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask of Dianna?
Um, well, I'm just glad to have her here on campus and have this really awesome variety, really of musicians. And they're all so great. And you know, here we are in Minot and have all these great people. So that's really what I want to share.
How does Dianna find the music scene in Minot? What is it like for a musician living here?
Okay, that's a great question. When my husband and I first moved here in 2003, we were absolutely astounded by how much music was happening here. We had been in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I was one of 100 or more pianists that were very, very qualified. And I had some opportunities to play, but not nearly as much as being in a small community. So I was thrilled that I could essentially play any music I wanted anytime with anybody I wanted to from the time that I arrived in Minot. And it's been very, very fruitful for me as a performer and as a collaborator. Luckily, there are people here that on campus, especially, that are amazing musicians and wonderful to play with.
Okay, I see another question. How far have you gone in the world to perform?
Okay, well, I had the fortune of traveling to Shanghai last um, May and June, and spent about 10 days there. And Eric and I performed a couple of concerts, and that was absolutely amazing. I've also gone the other direction. I've performed in Italy a couple of times as well. As far north as I've gone, probably Saskatoon.
Wow. It's interesting in various directions.
Yeah, well, you never know when you're going to get a colleague from some place that you know that is interested in collaborating and having you at their festival or coming for concerts. So we've been very fortunate to be able to travel.
Absolutely. Well, Dianna, thank you very much for being on the program. And again, because of the nature of this program, we're definitely glad that you're still here and can be part of the Peanut Gallery momentarily.
Yes.
Well, we're going to go ahead and bring on our second guest, Alex Deufel, a professor of biology here at Minot State University. Alex, thank you also for being on the program.
Oh, you're welcome.
So could you tell us where you studied also, where you took your degrees?
Well, I did my undergraduate degree in Calgary, in Alberta, Canada. So I went there from Germany to get a degree. And when I was there, I really fell in love with anatomy and studying in university life. So I decided, well, okay, I want to find a way to never leave the university. And I started looking for graduate school opportunities and found one at Lehigh University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. So that's where I got my doctorate. I did not do a master's. In that program, you went straight to doctorate. And after I was done with that, I thought, well, okay, let's look for a job. And I always liked the prairie people. There were lots of them in Calgary at the time and when I was there. And so I looked for jobs in the Northern Tier, and I found one. And that's how I ended up in Minot.
Excellent. And we had talked briefly Oh, I see another question. You do not have a Canadian accent, so where are you from? I see the question says.
I'm originally from Germany. And when I first went to the United States, people actually did claim that I talked Canadian. But
Oh,
I think I
really?
lost that since then. I pretty much learned how to speak English in Canada, so I had a lot of the es and about things like that. So people would notice, but I think most of that went away.
Yeah, I have some friends and colleagues from China who spoke in the British English conventions, and it's always fascinating for them to share those and for them to note my Americanisms and
Yeah.
multiple Englishes, world Englishes. They're such a wonderful thing. So we had also been talking about this notion of human chimerism. Am I saying it right? Chimerism?
Chimerism.
Hmm. What exactly is that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting topic. A chimera, you know from mythology, right? It's a creature with all kinds of mismatched body parts.
Hmm.
That might be a lion's body, a goat's head, a horse's tail, and so on, right? So we know actually now that there are within animals chimeras from multiple pieces. Now, they don't look like the mythological creature, but there are people, if we're sticking with humans, that are genetically actually more than one person. And in people, you usually cannot tell in an outward way that it's two genetic things. In non-human animals, you sometimes can. So there are chimeric cats that halfway down the middle, the color is completely different, and it's a straight line down the cat where one side might be orange, the other side might be black, and different eye colors and so on. In humans, that's not usually the case because we don't have outward variants like this within one person. But how do you notice that there's chimerism in humans? And there are very strange cases. Sometimes it's relatively easy to tell with an intersex person that somebody might have both male and female sexual characteristics. And if you test the tissues, you find out that, wow, okay, the male parts of this person have male genetics, and the other half has female genetics. Sometimes it's way more hidden than that, and it comes out through a fluke. So there was a fairly famous case in the early 2000s where a mother applied for assistance for her children, and there was some kind of genetic test done. I forget why they genetically tested, and it came out that she was not the mother genetically of the children that she gave birth to, which was absolutely shocking to her. And then she had another pregnancy, and they literally had somebody in the delivery room to make sure, yeah, she is the person giving birth to this child. She did not steal this child from someone. And they did the genetic test, and yet again, genetically, this child was not very closely related to her. And it turns out that her ovarian tissues in this case were actually from a twin that
Wow.
she had absorbed, a fraternal twin that she had absorbed in her mom's uterus. And so now people started looking for this, and it's actually more common than we thought. And it's usually either in vitro fertilization that the two embryos fused into one early on, or a natural occurrence. There's a twin pregnancy, fraternal twins, which sometimes can be a male and female, as you know, and the tissues fuse, and some of the cells that were male give rise to male genetic body parts, and some give rise to female body parts. Depending when that happens in development, it can be in the gonads or it can just be in the regular tissues, and you might never know that this is the case. Yeah, it's more common than you would think. I don't have a number for you, but it does happen. And usually it's no big deal unless it's involving the development of sex organs in some way.
So I saw a question, why is it important to know this about people, this chimerism, and are there any health ramifications to this?
No, these ramifications with my child is not genetically mine, if that ever happens. which most people, if that's the case for my son, how would I know unless there's a reason to test? And sometimes people do tests for bone marrow transplants, or they're looking for a match for an organ transplant, and that's how it comes out, that their mother or father or something like that is not matched with them.
So I wonder if there's any false results when it comes to these types of tests, the test for paternity, or I guess in some cases maternity then.
Yes,
yeah.
There is a possibility for sure.
Oh. So I wanted to also ask you about your research on snakes, if you could talk about that for a little bit as well.
Yeah, I was always interested in anatomy, and so how did I find snakes as a research topic was really that without arms and legs, how are they so successful evolutionarily? There are thousands of species of snakes, and they seem very strange to us, right? No arms and legs, how are they so successful? So that's why I was interested in studying them. And my particular topics always go around sort of how they're using their faces and their heads and the bones in their skulls. Their skulls are really, really flexible compared to a mammalian skull like ours. Our jaw kind of goes up and down a little bit of sideways, not much else. But in snakes, the lower portion of the jaw, the lower jaw is not connected in the middle, so they can really spread that apart. And then the bones in the upper part of the skull are loosely connected and independently mobile. And so some of the questions I ask in my research is, how do you maybe modify one part of such a complex system without losing the functionality in other parts? Because they're using their head to capture prey, and they have to use that same structure to swallow prey. Are there trade-offs evolutionarily? And how do you come up with all this evolutionary variety?
So have you found that there are differences, say, even between different types of snakes, like between death adders or mambas, or is that type of variation showing up between the different types, or are these commonalities of all types of snakes?
There are differences between major groupings of snakes. The ones you mentioned are part of what we call the elapids. They have a certain type of jaw apparatus that is different from vipers, let's say, different from boa constrictors. So there are bigger categories of snakes that do things slightly differently.
I see. Well, I wanted to make sure I opened up for more questions. And again, so Dianna, and I've got some questions from Robert. Dianna, do you have questions that you'd like to ask as well?
Well, sure. First, I want to kind of send back the compliment that Alex gave to me. I certainly appreciate all the expertise that is available on our campus and the immense variety of different people interested in different things. My question is, I was curious if there has been research done on snakes and music.
Other than what you see with the snake charmers, with a cobra coming out of a basket, they do not respond to the sound. They are unable to hear sound through the air, really, as far as we know. They pick up vibrations through the ground, through tree branches. So if you knock on their cage, they will know that. But sound transmission across the air is pretty much ruled out for snakes. So with the snake charmers, they respond to the motion of the flute, not to the music. But other than that, I'm not aware of any interaction there with music.
Interesting. I remember playing, snake charmer music when I was first learning, piano. There's always these very entertaining little pieces, and I remember doing that, thinking, "Oh, wow, snakes are musical," but maybe they're not.
No,
or maybe not musical in the way that we would think of musical.
No.
We have another question on the chat. It says, I heard there was an elapid that has a backward fang. Is this true?
The snakes all have, the ones that do have fangs, the fangs point back, usually. And the only ones that are able to sort of project it forward are vipers. They're actually able to rotate that fang out. You might have seen images of rattlesnakes striking, and you see those two fangs sticking out the front of their face. But most snakes just have sort of sickle-shaped teeth. All of their teeth are like that in general, and they point backwards. There's some specialized snakes that eat hard things, like there's an egg-eating snake, and there's some that eat snails. They extract snails from shells, and they have specialized dentition to do those jobs. But in general, teeth always point backwards, including the fang.
The question is a fang to carry prey out of a hole. So something like a retrieval system?
Yeah, there's one category of snakes. They're called attract aspis. The mole vipers, they're not actually vipers, so that's a misnomer. They're in their own category, and they have a very large fang that they're able to extrude sort of sideways and use almost like a gaff to pull on prey. They're fossorial, that means they're burrowing, or at least going into burrows after small rodents, let's say. And in that confined space, they're able to manipulate prey with that fang, sticking sideways.
See, I do find this very fascinating.
Yeah.
So I wanted to thank you both, Dianna Anderson and Alex Deufel. Thank you both for being on the program today. Again, it's been a great conversation, and I'm glad that we had some interesting questions that you all have brought to bear as well. This has been a very interesting, this has been more of a roundtable discussion almost. This is wonderful. Well, you've reached this time again in the podcast where it's time to end the program. I'm going to say again, remember, this is Minot State University. Be seen, be heard, be inspired. Again, even in difficult times like this, remember, we can get through it, and we will get through it. To play us out, Dianna Anderson has given us Brahms Intermezzo, Opus 118, number 2. Thanks again.